We had to watch our kids sleep until they reached 6'3". It was terrifying. The first time I saw it, I thought I was dreaming. Ethan was 4, a whirlwind of blonde hair and boundless energy. He'd been having nightmares, thrashing in his sleep, so Mark and I started taking shifts, one of us always in the room. It was my turn that night. Around 3 a.m., I heard him whimper. I reached out to smooth his hair, and that's when I saw it. He was bigger, not just taller, but thicker, his limbs stretching like taffy being pulled. I gasped, stumbling back against the wall. His pajamas, which had fit perfectly that evening, were straining at the seams. Mark ran in, his face etched with concern. "What is it? What's wrong?" I could only point, my throat constricted with fear. We watched, frozen, as Ethan grew another inch, then another. His breathing was ragged, like he was running a marathon in his sleep. The bones in his face seemed to sharpen, his jawline becoming more defined. It was grotesque, unnatural. Then, as quickly as it started, it stopped. He lay still, sweating, his face pale. We rushed to his side, checking his pulse. It was rapid but steady. He was still asleep. When he woke up, he didn't remember a thing. He seemed fine, except taller. He'd gained at least 3 inches overnight. His clothes were too small. Dr. Carter was our pediatrician, a kind woman who'd known Ethan since he was born. She ran every test imaginable. Blood work, hormone panels, scans. Everything came back normal. "It's unusual," she admitted, her brow furrowed. "But sometimes children have growth spurts. We'll keep an eye on it." But it wasn't a normal growth spurt. It happened again the next night and the night after that. Each time, Ethan grew several inches while he slept. He became incredibly strong. One morning, he accidentally ripped the door off its hinges trying to open it. He didn't even seem to notice. We were terrified. We locked the bedroom door at night, but he started sleepwalking. He'd wander around the house, bumping into furniture, his eyes vacant. He broke a window one night, cutting himself badly, but didn't even flinch. The blood just dripped down his arm as he continued to wander. Mark, always the pragmatist, started researching. He spent hours online, poring over medical journals, searching for anything that could explain what was happening. He consulted with specialists across the country, sending them Ethan's test results. No one had ever seen anything like it. Other kids in town started changing. At first, it was just whispers at the grocery store, worried glances between parents. Then the stories started to spread. Little Timmy Henderson had grown 4 inches overnight. Sarah Miller had broken her arm but hadn't cried. A wave of fear washed over our small town. We started locking our doors, afraid of our own children. Mrs. Hawthorne, our elderly neighbor, had lived in town her whole life. She was a font of local history and folklore. One afternoon, while Mark was at work, I went to see her. "It happened before you know," she said, her voice raspy. She was sitting on her porch swing, her eyes cloudy with age. "What happened?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Years ago," she said, "a sickness came to the children. They grew too fast, became different. It was tied to the woods, to the old place." "The old place, the clearing," she said, "deep in the Blackwood Forest. There's something there, something that shouldn't be." Mark dismissed it as superstition. He was convinced there was a scientific explanation, a genetic anomaly, a rare disease. He built a makeshift lab in our basement, running tests, analyzing samples. He was obsessed. Detective Harding, the local sheriff, started investigating. He was a good man, but he was out of his depth. He tried to reassure us, telling us it was just mass hysteria, a coincidence. But he couldn't deny the evidence. The damaged property, the missing children found safe, but miles from their homes in the middle of the night. The affected children, now all exceeding 6 feet, began to gravitate towards each other. They seemed drawn together like magnets. They'd meet in the park, standing in silent groups, their eyes fixed on some unseen point in the distance. During their sleepwalking episodes, they'd wander the streets together, a silent, towering army of children. One night, they converged on the old town hall, a historic building in the center of town. They didn't break in, didn't vandalize anything. They just stood there staring at it, their faces blank. Then as one, they started pushing. The town hall was old but solid. It took them hours, but they didn't stop. They pushed and pushed until the walls started to crack, until the roof began to sag. By dawn, the building was on the verge of collapse. That's when we knew we had to do something. We couldn't just stand by and watch our children destroy our town, our lives. I remembered what Mrs. Hawthorne had said about the clearing in the Blackwood Forest. It was a long shot, but we were desperate. We gathered the other parents, the ones whose children were affected, and we made a plan. The next night, we followed our children. They walked in a silent procession, their movements synchronized, their eyes fixed on the distant tree line. We trailed behind, our hearts pounding, our hands trembling. The Blackwood Forest was dense and dark, the trees towering overhead, blocking out the moonlight. The air was thick with the smell of damp earth and decay. We stumbled through the undergrowth, our clothes snagging on branches, our faces scratched by thorns. Finally, we reached the clearing. It was a wide, open space, bathed in an eerie glow. In the center stood an ancient structure, a circle of standing stones covered in moss and lichen. A low hum emanated from the stones, vibrating in the air. Our children stopped at the edge of the clearing. They stood there for a moment, their heads tilted, as if listening to something we couldn't hear. Then they stepped forward into the circle. They closed their eyes, their bodies swaying gently. Their faces were serene, almost peaceful. They seemed to be in a trance, communicating with the stones. Mark had brought some of his equipment, sensors and meters he'd used in his research. He was trying to measure the energy emanating from the stones, trying to understand what was happening. "There's something here," he said, his voice hushed. "A field of energy. It's resonating with them." That's when it went bad. Ethan's eyes snapped open. They were no longer his eyes. They were cold, empty, and old. He raised his hand, and one of the other fathers was flung back into the trees. We tried to reach them to pull them out of the circle, but they were too strong. They pushed us away, their movements swift and precise. They were no longer our children. They were something else. I looked at Ethan, my son, standing there, his face impassive, his eyes devoid of emotion. I knew I had to do something, anything, to break the connection. Mark had rigged up a device to disrupt the energy field. It was a long shot. He hadn't even tested it, but it was all we had. I grabbed it from him, my hands shaking. "Sarah, no," he shouted. "It could be dangerous," but I didn't listen. I ran towards the stones, holding the device aloft. The children turned to face me, their eyes blazing with anger. They started to advance, their bodies tensing, ready to strike. I closed my eyes and pressed the button. A wave of energy erupted from the device, washing over the clearing. The stones shuddered, the hum intensified, then abruptly stopped. The children cried out, collapsing to the ground. The structure started to crumble, the stones falling to pieces. The clearing was plunged into darkness. When I opened my eyes, the children were stirring. They looked confused, disoriented. They were still tall, still strong. But the connection was broken. They were our children again. The drive home was silent. Ethan sat in the back seat, staring out the window. He didn't say a word. The days that followed were a blur of tests, evaluations, and therapy sessions. Scientists and medical specialists descended on our town, eager to study the children to understand what had happened. But they couldn't explain it. They could only document the changes, the lingering effects. The children were physically healthy, but they were different. They were taller than their peers, stronger, more mature. They had a certain knowingness in their eyes, a sense that they had seen things, experienced things that no child should ever have to. Ethan struggled to reintegrate into school. He was self-conscious about his height, his strength. He was bullied, ostracized. He became withdrawn, isolated. Mark and I tried to support him, to help him adjust. We enrolled him in therapy, spent hours talking to him, listening to his fears and anxieties. We tried to reassure him that he was still our son, that we still loved him, no matter what. The town slowly began to recover, but the scars remained. The old town hall was rebuilt, but the memory of the children pushing it to the brink of collapse lingered in the air. The residents were wary, suspicious. They looked at the children with a mixture of fear and pity. Years passed. Ethan grew into a young man, tall and strong, but haunted by his past. He never fully recovered from what happened in the clearing. He was always a little different. One night I went to check on him. He was asleep, lying on his back, his face pale in the moonlight. I stood there for a moment watching him, my heart aching with a mixture of love and fear. Then I saw it. A subtle flicker in his eyes, a faint twitch at the corner of his mouth. It was barely perceptible, but it was there. A hint of the connection he once had to the stones, to the ancient power that resided in the Blackwood Forest. I backed out of the room, my heart pounding. I knew with a chilling certainty that it wasn't over. It was just dormant, waiting for its chance to return. Now I'm watching Olivia sleep, her features soft and innocent in the dim light. She's beautiful, my daughter. But I can't shake the fear that gnaws at me, the fear that what happened to Ethan might happen to her, that the darkness in the Blackwood Forest might reach out and claim her too. So I watch and I wait, praying that the past will stay buried, that my children will be safe. But deep down, I know that some things never truly die. They just sleep, waiting for the right moment to awaken.